All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a behemoth, one of the absolute largest education systems on the planet. We're talking about hundreds of millions of futures on the line here, so, the stakes for the global economy literally couldn't be higher. For this explainer, we're going to treat the massive Indian education system kind of like a patient. We'll run some tests, diagnose the systemic flaws, and then prescribe a really actionable path forward using both local data and global evidence. There's a ton of incredible info to cover, so let's just get straight to it.
Here's our roadmap for today. First up, education versus true learning. Second, the exam and coaching trap. Third, rethinking teachers and careers. Fourth, global lessons for India. And finally, we'll wrap up with the new Indian model.
Section 1. Education versus true learning. Act 1. The diagnosis. So let's start by looking at the hundreds of millions of students walking into Indian classrooms every single year, hoping for a totally transformed life. Now, India has absolutely crushed it when it comes to expanding access and enrollment over the decades. That's an undeniable win. But as the National Education Policy 2020 impartially points out, access is really just stage 1. We have to stop and ask ourselves a pretty tough question. Are our kids actually being educated, or are they just being trained to pass exams? Because the true goal of a modern system has to be teaching a child how to actually think, how to solve dynamic problems, how to spot misinformation, and frankly, how to become an independent, capable citizen. And the scale of this foundational problem, it's staggering. 650,000. That's how many kids were tested by the Annual Status of Education Report, or ASER, across 600 districts in 2024. Testing kids directly is absolutely crucial, because just looking at school attendance logs, that doesn't tell us what's actually clicking in their minds. And what this massive mountain of localized data showed us is that moving a kid up to the next grade administratively definitely does not mean they've progressed academically. A child can sit at a desk in class 5 every single day and still completely lack basic reading or math skills. It's wild. The World Bank actually has a name for this massive gap. They call it learning poverty. And to cure learning poverty, we really need a total mindset shift. We've got to move away from this education received model, where we just ask, hey, did the kids show up to class? And shift to an education achieved model, asking, okay, can they actually read, calculate, and reason? To pull that off, every child needs periodic diagnostic assessments. But listen, here's the kicker. This isn't about punishing teachers, and it's definitely not about stigmatizing the kids. We have to treat these assessments like a routine medical checkup for learning, rather than, a weapon to use against students. Section 2. The exam and coaching trap. Symptoms of the underlying disease. This intense obsession with examinations is really the second major symptom of this educational disease. Because exams totally dictate school admissions, streams, and eventually careers, students are under crushing pressure to just optimize for marks at all costs. The whole focus shifts to memorizing boxes to check. They're constantly asking what's going to be on the test instead of why does this concept actually matter? And sure, memorization has its place, but memorization without actual deep comprehension, that leaves students totally unprepared for a modern global economy. An economy that, let's be honest, demands creativity, collaboration, and analytical reasoning way more than just recalling facts. And this hyper-competitive environment sparks a really dangerous commercial cycle. It goes like this. It starts when better income families buy extra educational resources and private tutoring. Naturally, their kids get an academic edge. But because these exams are graded on a curve, it causes the overall systemic competition to just absolutely skyrocket. Before you know it, more and more families feel completely forced into buying coaching just to survive the system, whether they can actually afford it or not. The end result? Education becomes massively commercialized, and this parallel private tutoring industry basically substitutes actual schooling. It's a tough cycle to break. Section 3. Rethinking teachers and careers. Rebuilding the foundation. Look, if we want schools to be credible institutions that don't rely on expensive parallel tutoring, we have to start right at the foundation. And no system in the world is better than its teachers. We absolutely have to treat teachers as trusted professionals with real autonomy. They need a clear, structured path for career growth. Imagine starting as a senior teacher, moving up to a master teacher, then a mentor teacher, and finally an academic leader. And doing all of that without ever being forced to abandon their students in the classroom just to get better pay or higher professional status, that's a game changer. But alongside transforming teaching, we've got to cure this deeply ingrained societal bias we have. For decades, society has put a massive, disproportionate weight on traditional academic degrees, while totally undervaluing skilled occupations.
You know the drill. We tell kids they absolutely must become engineers, doctors, or IAS officers. But what we desperately need is to encourage them to become excellent technicians, electricians, and master craftsmen. This obsession with academic degrees creates a huge mismatch between our education system and what the labor market actually needs to function.
Section 4, Global Lessons for India. Act 2, The Global Consultation. Now, let's look outward for a bit to see what India can realistically learn from other nations. Keeping in mind, of course, that the goal here is adaptation, not just blind replication. When we look globally, there's a really fascinating contrast. We can adapt Finland's incredible trust in professional teachers and their use of formative assessments. We can definitely learn from Germany's dual vocational system, where apprenticeships are highly respected pathways that seamlessly combine school and the workplace. And we can absolutely embrace America's model for university innovation and research. But, and this is a massive but, we have to actively avoid importing their specific systemic flaws. I mean, particularly America's extreme inequality and massive private tuition costs, which average around $34,000 a year for private institutions. Nobody wants to copy that part. To actually back up any of these ambitious reforms, financing is absolutely key. To put it into perspective, while the OECD average expenditure on education is about 4.7% of GDP, recent UNESCO data shows India hovering around 4%. That gap might sound small, but it represents a massive amount of unspent potential. But hey, it's not just about throwing more money at the problem, it's about spending smart. We need highly targeted public funding for the things that actually move the needle: modernizing libraries, expanding digital infrastructure, hiring special educators. And all of this has to be backed by strict, localized public accountability dashboards. Because at the end of the day, public money must produce public accountability.
Section 5, the new Indian model. Act 3, the local cure.
This leads us to our final act, taking all these global findings and local diagnoses and synthesizing them into a real, actionable cure. Ultimately, India doesn't need a Finnish, German, or American system. It needs an Indian model built on 5 clear principles. Number 1, foundational learning. We have to guarantee students can actually read, calculate, and reason before anything else. 2, great teachers, respected, empowered professionals. 3, multiple pathways. We need to bridge the gap between academic degrees and vocational trades so students actually have choices. 4, less rote, more reasoning, transitioning our exams to test actual application of knowledge. And 5, equity, guaranteeing that the quality of a child's education does not depend on their parents' bank account, period. Because think about it, a successful education system shouldn't just prep a kid for the next standardized test. It shouldn't just churn out millions of students who only know how to remember answers. It must produce citizens who look at a problem and ask, what can I do about it? That is the true shift we need. A shift toward real capability, immense curiosity, and the ethical grounding required to navigate the next 50 years of their lives with absolute confidence. India is home to millions of extraordinarily talented young people. The real challenge is creating a framework that actually converts that massive talent pool into tangible capability and progress. So as India strives to become a true knowledge economy, we really have to ask ourselves this final defining question. Will we continue to treat education as just another government department? Or will we finally recognize it as the very foundation of the republic itself? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.